here we go. Back and better than ever and in different locations tonight. Welcome one, welcome all. It is a beautiful Thursday evening. We are not tired of the snow just yet, despite what my co-host tonight may tell you. We're just trying to pander to the winter weather fans here tonight who are in studio and listening with us on this Thursday evening. Hey, welcome everybody to the Gem City Sports Podcast, brought to you proudly by Rebich Investments, keeping financial advice simple. Isaac Petcash, Jonathan Williams. I'm in the Millennium Sound studio tonight. Jonathan making it work with us at home. We'll have Nick Artman and Wayne Bradford with us tomorrow night. We've got a good show planned for you on this Thursday evening, and a big live guest also joining us in about 5 minutes along the way. Jonathan, you are tired of the snow. I also imagine you're probably tired of the news. What is worse, your arch rival in college football hiring the most legendary coach in the sport? or do we go the route of the fact that it just went another foot on us in terms of the S word today?
Okay, so while we don't like North Carolina, we don't really care very much about North Carolina football.
You
don't? They're not ever relevant enough in football for us to worry about.
Oh, I see. That's going to change.
So, congrats to Bill Belichick. Congrats to them. That's going to be interesting to see how Bill Belichick navigates a college landscape in the world of NIL and players demanding money for quite literally everything. So that's going to be interesting to watch. But yeah, man, this snow got to go, dog. I am tired of having to scrape ice off of my windshield. I am tired of shoveling. I am tired. I live in a second story apartment. I am tired of salting my steps so I don't slip and fall every time I want to leave my house. I'm tired of it. The snow is pretty to look at. It is pretty to go somewhere and visit when there's snow on the ground. But living here, I am done.
I get it. All I'm going to say is this: just wait until we get to mid-February and you think it's gone. You think it's gone, right? We get past Christmas, we get past the new year, Valentine's Day ends, and everyone's like, oh, spring's coming. It's going to be great. No, you just wait. There's going to be the worst part is the snowfall right in that end of February, early March, where we think everything's gone, and then, poof, goodbye.
See, lucky for me, that's around the time my training camp starts.
So I was going to say, you may have one more snowfall to watch as the wings of your private jet just fly off into the South Carolina air. Yeah, Keystone Region Media said it well. It's eerie. So be it. Hey, but we're glad you're with us tonight, whether you're braving the cold or the snow. Our show, as we talked about, is proudly sponsored by Rebich Investments, keeping financial guidance simple. If you want more info, just head over to the website, www.rebichinvestments.com, or you can call 734-3433, keeping financial guidance simple. Hey, a lot of basketball talk tonight, a lot of great start to the season for so many local teams, and in a few minutes, we're going to be joined by former District 10 winning coach Tom Koval, who stepped down as the Erie head coach. He's joining us tonight, just his observations as he continues in the world of high school basketball, just what he's thought of the season early on, some questions we have for him. But I want to start with the big news of the week and the news that broke just a couple of days ago, and that's that Edinboro football is going to have a new head coach. Jake Nulph stepping down from the program. He departs for Kiski Area High School as the athletic director and now goes closer to home near the Pittsburgh area in the Whippeal. Jonathan, it's such an interesting choice of Coach Nulph, let's say, because again, we don't know if he was going to be fired if he made this decision. We don't know if it was a mutual agreement. We don't know any of that. But your first thoughts on Jake Nulph leaving the program and going back to either coach or, as we know, be the AD over at Kiski?
For me, it's about going closer to home. Edinboro, unfortunately, hasn't been a very strong football team, for lack of a better way to put it, for the last couple of years. I think his record in a couple of years was 15-28. Yeah. It's just one of those things where if you have an opportunity to get back to a level where you feel like you can succeed at, and it puts you closer to home, puts you closer to family, and it's just kind of one of those good situations where everything, like the stars kind of align for you a little bit, and you're able to check a couple different boxes and give Edinboro a chance to maybe get someone else that can potentially turn that program around a little bit.
I find it interesting because, I think Jake Nulph's time at Edinboro was so, in a roundabout way, odd. And I don't mean that necessarily in the bad way. I think the record, of course, is not indicative maybe of how great of a motivator he was. I think that probably was the number one trait that he had. He was a great motivator of players. I know that, a lot of players that I spoke to spoke highly of him and just how he was in the locker room and his ability to speak to players. But for me, I think really this season was a microcosm of Jake Nulph's tenure at Edinburgh. He pulls off some incredible victories, right? I mean, you look at the way that they ended last season, they pick up 2 top 25 victories and they beat Robert Morris, a Division I team. But then you look at the end and you think, well, the guy's only got 15 wins, right? He averaged in his 4 years with the Scots just over, 3 wins per year, 3.5, if you will. And so I look at this and I think he was a coach that to me was capable of winning any game, right? We saw that this year with big wins, specifically the Robert Morris game is the one that comes to mind. But then you just look at some of the other games that they probably should have won, not just last year, but the few years before that. To me, the Gannon game comes to mind, right, Jonathan, with you being a Gannon grad, right? They're up in the fourth quarter. They're seemingly dominating play, and then all of a sudden things go awry. I just feel like Jake Nulph, as much as he had that charisma and that ability to inspire players, you just wonder if it translated to a consistency thing. I think for me, the big thing that I look at for Coach Nulph is great motivator, capable of winning any game, but just in my view, not consistent enough with the program.
Yeah, that was exactly where I was going to go with it, is consistency. There's some games where you watch that Edinburgh team play and they would come out and lay an egg, and it just didn't look like good football. And then there's some games, like you mentioned, like they go down and beat Robert Morris, a Division I opponent. Like, Edinburgh had the ability to win any game that they were in. I don't think they were ever just like a bad football team. They were just unable to find a level of consistency in their performances. Sometimes they looked like a really good football team. Sometimes they did not. And they looked on the complete opposite end of that spectrum. For Nulph, I mean, I know a lot of his players love him, and a lot of his players loved, like you said, the type of motivator that he was. And he was definitely well revered in that locker room. But when you're not able to put together and string together consistent results, that's kind of the nature of this business. And I don't know that Edinburgh was prepared to move on from him quite yet, but it was kind of trending in that direction if things stayed as they were. So when you have an opportunity to get out of there ahead of time and go to a situation that's favorable for you and your family and your life situation, you kind of can't fault him for going ahead and taking that.
Yeah, and so now for me, the big question is, who does Edinburgh go after? And I think there are plenty of suitable candidates. They did mention in their release that they're going to have a nationwide search. I don't even really think they need to look that far. I think there are plenty of coaches around who would be suitors. And I'm not going to list any specific ones, but I think, people around this area kind of have an understanding, an idea. Do they promote internally? Do they choose to go elsewhere externally? I think there are certainly a lot of opportunities for Edinburgh to potentially hire some guys who are pretty tenured and pretty steadfast. You look at, to me, if you're talking internally, Tony Papley would be the number one candidate, the DC there, who's done a really good job with turning around that defense, and they were much better in the last few years under him. I look at that. But Jonathan, for me, I guess my question to you is, what kind of coach does Edinburgh want to hire next? If you were Dr. Catherine Robbins over at Edinburgh, who are you looking for in your next head coach, knowing what Jake Nulph was able to do and maybe what some things are left to be desired with the program?
For me, it's got to be someone that establishes a football culture there, which I guess establishes is maybe the wrong word, but someone who improves the football culture there, because I think there's a pretty rich football culture already established at Edinburgh, but they need a coach that is able to tap into that and kind of bring back the pride of what Edinburgh football has been in the past and in previous decades, and kind of restore that pride to the program. I just feel like, that pride hasn't really been there with the results and the seasons that they've had as of late. It just hasn't. There's not a respect around Edinburgh football. There's not a respect around that team. When you think of them, they're that team that can beat you if they catch you on a good day, but they're also that team that can show up and not look very good if you catch them on a bad day. So just someone who can restore the program back to that level of pride and kind of just the old days of Edinburgh football, where they took pride in it and they were able to win some games. And you didn't fear playing Edinboro, but you knew you were in for a fight whenever you played them.
So we'll see. Fighting Scots now have a decision to make in the coming weeks and coming months. We'll see how long it takes them to make a head coaching decision. They obviously have some time, but you certainly want to get the guy in that you want pre-spring workouts and things of that nature, because as we know, the NIL, transfer portal, all that fun stuff is looming large every single time and every single year, I should say, that these teams flip the script to 2025. All right, that's it for the Jake Nulph football talk. Time now to get into some basketball. Before we do that, though, again, want to thank our sponsor, as always, Rebridge Investments. They do a great job around the Edinboro and rest of the community. They're the sponsor of our show tonight and all shows on the Gem City Sports Podcast Network. They keep financial guidance simple. Head to their website, www.rebridgeinvestments.com, or you can simply call 814-734-3433 to learn more. All right, time for high school basketball talk. It's been a really great start to the season for so many teams, so many that some of which have been surprises, some of which have been expected, but as we know, and as our next guest knows, any game in the beginning part of the season is so crucial. So we are very pleased to welcome in a former District 10 champion head coach and somebody who knows the Erie basketball scene very well. Tom Koval joining us from his house in a Kobe Bryant jersey in the background to boot. That's just a flex, Tom.
You see ESPN and they all have good backgrounds. So I wanted to have something looking nice back there. That's all.
Is that signed?
That is not signed. No, I'm very lower level. It's just a blank jersey, but it looks good on the wall.
Hey, man, higher than me. I don't have any jerseys like that to my name, so we'll take it. Hey, but before we get into this, how are things for you? I know obviously it was a difficult decision for you to step down from Erie. Take us through life afterwards and kind of what it's been like for you now, not as a head coach of one of the District 10 powerhouses.
Well, I'll tell you what. I just got back from my travel ball basket practice with my daughter's team. I thoroughly enjoy coaching there. I was one of my assistant coaches is Jimmy D'Alessandro. So I mentioned I was going to be on the show with you, and he told me to say hello.
I don't want to tell you what I got in his math class grade, but we'll see it for a different day.
So to be honest, I wasn't sure what to expect, especially as the season rolled around. But I'm stress-free. I'm really enjoying my time with the family. I coached my daughter's sixth grade team at Fairview. We just happened to go undefeated, which was a lot of fun, being with my daughter and her friends. My son's playing fourth and fifth grade basketball at Fairview, and I was at the game Tuesday night watching him play. I actually ran the score clock. So it's all smiles for me right now. It's pretty cool to see my kids play and actually start to give back to them. But I miss being around the boys. I'm still teaching at Erie High, so I see them in the hallway. They come up and say hello, and that's been a big part of my life for the last 20 years. So I'm looking forward to watching some games of them play as well.
Wait a second, coach. Do you coach the sixth grade girls basketball team with the same level of intensity that you coach the Erie boys?
If you'd ask the girls, they'd say yes. I'll tell you what, I'm surprised with how competitive they are. I really get into it, and we have a lot of the same officials, so it's been a lot of fun for sure.
I'll tell you what, you know what, Coach, this is a smart guy who we have on the program running scoreboard, things of that nature. That way you have a job to do. So there's no frustration at officials or anything like that. I'm sure you've had conversations with them or whatnot, but hey, they can't get mad at you now. You're not the coach anymore.
Right.
Hey, well, first and foremost, thanks again for being on our program, and we hope to have Tom on in ensuing weeks. But I just want to talk about the District 10 basketball scene because obviously you're still around it. You're part of the game. You kind of know a lot about a lot of players, and there are certainly some teams that have a lot of guys that you faced last year. And, I think on the girls' side, you could say the same. You're kind of in tune with that. Let's start with this. There's so much talk every 2 years about the District 10 reclassification, right? And I think this year you see automatically, okay, Class 4A, we were talking last week with 17 teams. For you, it was, okay, it's against McDowell, and we know what we have to do to tailor our schedule for that. What do you make, in your mind, if you're one of the head coaches of those teams, what is going to be the challenge this year for those teams in 4A, so many that we see in Erie County, to be able to have a successful season knowing just the chaos that's going to be? Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I hate realignment. I understand the purpose of it, organizing like-sized schools into the league. But with 6 classes, it changes so often. right? Every 2 years, you're playing against new teams in different regions. It really stifles the rivalries. Um, you know, Starting coaching with the Metro and the ECL. I mean, you talk to the old heads, there was nothing better than that. But I certainly understand it. But like you said, yeah, it becomes chaotic. 1 year you're scheduling, at Erie High, because we only had a couple teams in our region. We had to schedule a ton of independent games, which was always a stressor. In this new 4A league, I mean, it's got 17 teams. They
Yeah.
added Northeast, Fairview, Girard, Conneaut, Oil City, Franklin, Farrell, and of course Prep moved down to playing that as well. So, I guess it could add excitement because there's new stuff there, but it's a lot of new teams. So as a coach, you like to be familiar with your region teams. There's some battles because you know them so well. Like in any sport, whether it's the NFL or the NBA, you really know your conference teams. So there's a lot of new flavor in there. So it'll be interesting to see how things play out.
And I was going to say, too, because you mentioned something that was important to me when we were texting back and forth talking about the show, is that there are now so many teams in the class, so you're going to be playing many of them, including in your region. But as you know, and as somebody who's been a coach of a powerhouse program, you kind of have to tailor your schedule, right, to play teams that are either at the level or above the level that you want to play when you get to playoff time. And, we talked over text about, okay, the winter is canceling games, the schedule getting moved up, things are now rapid fire pace and whatnot. As a coach, what is the challenge for so many of these teams to try to A, get through these games, but also B, make sure you're now scheduling teams that maybe force you to have a gauntlet of games before you even get to region play?
I can tell you through my experience, there's nothing better than ending the season on a win streak, right? And you want to build your schedule and win big games going in there, so your guys have a lot of confidence. Watching the weather roll in and thinking about the early season, I felt the stress for some of the coaches. Like, that's so difficult. Number one, the PIAA, pushing the season up a little bit earlier. You get 12 practices before your first game. And most people don't realize a lot of the stuff that you have to do as a coach to do that. Like in 12 practices, you got to put your man offense in, you got to put a zone offense in against an even front, against an odd front, right? You got to do any sets that you want to set up, right? Special teams, right? As far as baseline out of bounds, you need man and zone for that. You need sideline out of bounds, right? And then we're going to press. Well, they might press us. So we need a zone press breaker, a man press breaker, special situations like a last second shots, right? And the end of a quarter, end of the half, if it's a full court shot, a half court shot, is it against the zone, is it against the man? So you're putting all those different things in. I can't imagine trying to get it in 12 days, right? In 12 practices with high school kids, that have a hard time paying attention after a long time, right? And I didn't even speak of defense at all, about putting your defenses in. So there's so much to cram in there before your first game that the early season, you just never know how it's going to play out. But the end of the season, I think that's what's got to be really important as you build into that.
Okay. Tom Koval, former District 10 championship coach. Jonathan, you got a question?
Yeah. So, Coach, I've been a volunteer assistant coach at the high school basketball level before, so I'm kind of understanding as you're talking about all of the different sets you got to put in and your kind of responses for whatever other teams can throw at you. How much of that work are you guys able to get in preseason? And I'm talking maybe through like summer workouts or anything like that with like a core group of guys that you kind of have an idea of. These are going to be some guys that are going to be with us when winter rolls around. I know you have guys playing different sports at a lot of these schools, and you don't get them for the entire build up to basketball season. But how much of that work can you really get in before you get to those 12 practices? Because like you said, you don't have a lot of practices once the season gets going.
It can be difficult, and I think it depends a lot on the school. Like you said, some schools really rely on their athletes to play multiple sports, at the smaller schools. I know, in the past, I've had a lot of kids playing football, so we weren't able to put almost anything in. And then there's been some years where we just didn't have a lot of football players, so it was a lot easier, Last year for me, I had 10 seniors. So because we had a foundation of what we run and through my program, it made it a lot easier for me to step in and the guys were familiar with stuff. So it depends a lot on your program and what you have. And I think the good coaches try to put their basic stuff in the summer, and then early on in the season, you're just, really playing with, maybe a base defense and your base motion offense, and you start to build things up as you go.
Tom, let's talk some impressive teams early in the season, and I'll talk a little bit about the girls in a second, but just from your perspective on the boys side, we mentioned Class 4A. We know Cathedral Prep and what they've been able to do. They're already 2-0. They've already beat 2 4A teams by double digits. But for me, there are some other teams as well in addition to them that are really interesting. Are there teams that you've seen early in the season just from what you've caught or just from what their stats may show that are like, okay, they're interesting? Because again, as you've mentioned, as we've talked about, a lot of these teams have a lot of players back that you coached against in some form in the last few years.
Yeah, so I mean, you can base some opinions on and some expectations on what they did last year, but I think it's really difficult to do that, right? There's so many players that have to adjust to expanded roles because they've lost some players due to graduation, right? So it's hard to figure that out sometimes early in the season. A kid that had a role where he was passing to his main scorer a lot, and now all of a sudden he has to change his mindset and become that scorer. So it's not easy to do right away. Hopefully in the summer they can build some of that stuff up. But I know when you talk about some schools that could possibly be really good, like one that comes to mind to me is Meadville, right? They got all 5 of their starters back. Jake and Lucas Lutheran, I mean, they're really solid guards, and I think at the high school level, good guards is just, they're diamonds for your program. So I see a team like that. It has all that experience coming back, and there's somebody to watch out for sure. I think you mentioned Prep. They have a couple big wins already. Again, some experience coming back with Nando, with Spencer Kane, who can hit threes. You got the Thompson kid that I think could be a really special player. And they got a big Max Wallace, and you got the Kyle Horton's son, and the Wolford boy as well. So they're pretty deep when you look at the talent on that squad for sure. I can remember playing in our region. I love the Jacob Zeitz kid from Edinburgh. As athletic as we were,
we've
we couldn't
talked about
stop
him a
him from
lot on
getting
this
to the rim.
podcast.
Yeah. I mean, our guys
Yeah,
could not get him to not get to the rim. I mean, he can go. And they got that Anderson kid that can shoot threes that opens it up for him. I mean, that's a team that you could see doing really well. I like that 4A division, maybe because I'm a little biased because I played against a lot of those teams, but Harbor Creek's got a great point guard, JT Del Sandro. He's got a lot of experience starting as a freshman and moving his way through. I mean, he can certainly score. And I like some other players on their team. I did get to stop into the Fairview tip-off tournament. I like their lefty, the big Sam Laforia. He can finish underneath really well. And in the games I saw, they didn't even have the Tucker kid that can really shoot it from outside. He's one that really got, he made some threes. I think he made 3 threes against Erie High the other night. So that's a difference maker. Fairview, I'm excited to see. They were really young last year, but you can just see talent on their team. They play so well together. Pat Flaherty does a great job with those guys, and they can all play basketball. There might not be a big star on that team, but as the season goes on and they get used to playing with each other, they're going to be something to watch as well.
Coach, you just named just about every team in that 4A Region 7, and you've had something good to say about all of them. Just speak to the competitiveness of that region. What is it going to take for a team to really come out of that region? I know there's 4+ teams already sitting at 2 wins or more, and I know it's early in the season, but 4 or 5 teams that are off to really solid starts in that region already, and it's looking to be like a really competitive region in that 4A division.
Yeah, that's going to be a battle. I think to answer your question, I think the first thing they're going to need is some luck. You got to get the ball to bounce your way because it's going to be so competitive. When you start to play twice in a region and then you get into the playoffs, I mean, you're going to know the teams very well. The players, regardless of scouting report, they played against them, so they're going to know, their tendencies and who can shoot outside and who finishes well inside. The better they get to know them, sometimes the sloppier the games get. They get really physical, and it all comes down to loose balls and rebounding.
Coach, as we continue along here, I think it's so interesting you mentioned those teams because one of the things that you mentioned earlier is the non-region and more so non-classification games. And we talk, Meadville just had a huge game against Girard, a team that made the state semifinal last season. They got a big game against General McLean tomorrow night. These early season matchups, I think, are starting to mean more and more, and at least in my view. I think a few years back, of course, you want to get off to good starts, right? And you mentioned you want to end the season on a winning streak more than you want to start the year on a winning streak. But to me, I think these games early in the year are starting to tell more and more about what these teams are more than maybe it was before the pandemic. Your thoughts on the importance of the early season games and what you can see both when you were a coach and now as somebody who just kind of sees it from a 30,000 foot view as to, can we make out how good or not these teams are, or at least start to craft that in the first 5 to 7 games?
I mean, there's certainly an eye test, right? You can see some kids that can play basketball, right? You can tell the kids that can shoot and score. You can tell the kids that can get off the floor and change shots and protecting the rim on the defensive end. But early on, I think one thing you can't see is that team chemistry and how well they're going to play together. So you can see a lot of individual things, and like you guys said, like I did rattle off a lot of 4A players in that region and stuff, and there's a lot of good things, but how well are you going to play together? How well are you going to play team defense? And I think that's something that builds on throughout the year. The best teams, you can see them from the beginning, and you can actually see them get better as the season rolls on. So that's the big test for me. But the non-region stuff is it's interesting, because there's a lot of players or a lot of coaches and schools that don't want to have big non-region games. A lot of people are real comfortable with getting wins and having a really good record. I've always been the type that, let me be 11-11 and battle against some really tough games. So my guys, they get some adversity, they've taken some tough losses and they learn how to, to come back from that. Those are big lessons in making a team really good. But the non-region games, those are teams you don't know, right? So you don't have as good of a scouting report, and you're probably seeing different styles of basketball, maybe a different style of defense, maybe some different tempos, things that you're going to see in playoff time, at the state level. It's so tough because you're going to battle and grind out some really tough matches within District 10, and then you get into the state playoffs, and it might be completely different than the styles that you were playing before.
And I think what we've seen too, not to go off on a tangent here, is that, in the battle between the perennial sports battle between District 10 and the Whitfield, it has seemed to me, at least in boys basketball, that District 10 matches up well with Whitfield teams that you don't necessarily see in football, or maybe not even girls basketball or baseball or softball and whatever. I think as you talked about, it is that style thing where so many of these teams are so stout defensively that if you can get the scoring going, then it's automatically going to become an advantage for you come playoff time. Got a couple more for head coach Tom Koval, former District 10 champion at Erie High School and is still well in the thick of things for high school basketball. I'm going to put you on the spot, and you're probably never going to want to come on the show after this. You mentioned a bunch of players, right, that specifically individual that you think are ones to watch. If you had to put your finger on one player that you think would be the front runner, whether it's for District 10 Player of the Year or someone that is going to have their name in the stat book every single night, who's that guy and why?
Wow, that's a tough one because there's a lot of good ones. But I do. I think Michael Thompson at Prep, he seems like to be a very special player to me. Some of the things that he can do, the way he can get shots off, his footwork, the grit that he has offensively and defensively, and he's got a little edge to him too. I like that. I really like that about him, and I don't want to take away from any other really talented players, but that one, he caught my eye last year when we played against him, and I thought, like, people better watch out for him because if he keeps working hard, he's gonna be a guy that you don't want to guard.
I know we haven't talked about the girls' side of things, but I do want to ask you specifically because one of the things that Jonathan and I wanted to talk about on the girls' side when we're talking players to watch, and the team for me that's been most impressive has been Northwestern. And I don't know if you've gotten a chance to see Michaela Presser-Palmer at all or what she's been able to do, Coach. She just seems like a player that, we talk about transcendent talents. She seems to be one of those. And you look at Northwestern, they're sitting there already with 3-0. They've got a couple, they've got to win over a 4A school in that victory against Fairview earlier in the week. Michaela went for 14 points. This Northwestern team, to me, is one that could really make a big run. And your thoughts on just Michaela Presser-Palmer and what girls basketball has been early in the season and maybe what she's brought to, in your eyes, at least from any of the stuff you've seen from her?
Well, I saw her stat lines this year, so I'll be honest. I didn't get to see her play live. I'd have loved to have seen her play against Fairview, but I saw her a couple times last year. And the difference with her, as I believe she's already had several D1 offers. I mean, you look at her and she's a D1 athlete. She's long. She can get off the floor. She's so athletic with the ball. doing things that a lot of girls can't do. So to have her on your team, I mean, that's a great thing. And I think is Steve Sarwin is a new coach down there. Is that his first
Yes.
year? I know
Yes.
Steve pretty well. So that's pretty lucky to inherit somebody like that. I think every coach knows you can run some great offenses. But at the end of the play, you need somebody that can score it. And boy, she can do a lot of things. Very impressive to watch.
So how
Northwestern's
great
going to
is
be one to watch. Go ahead, Jonathan.
So how great is it? Because we've seen this kind of trend starting to take off, especially on the women's sports side in general, where women's basketball is becoming huge, and it's kind of in the limelight right now at the college and professional levels. How much of an impact do you think that has had on the current high school game and kind of crafting players like MPP and other really dominant female athletes at the high school level that really take the game seriously and just kind of raise that level and raise that class of girls high school basketball?
I think it's huge. It's been pretty amazing to watch over the last year. I can tell you, I didn't watch a lot of girls basketball, and last year I watched a triple header because I saw Caitlin Clark play, and then Paige Beckers, and then Juju Watson. And I watched 3 games in a row. Like, I don't watch NBA like that. I mean, it was exciting for me to see it because the girls have really raised their level of play. I mean, they're playing basketball at a higher tempo. They're shooting the ball. I mean, Caitlin Clark shooting from so deep. I mean, that's so cool to watch that. The way Paige can run the show as a point guard, and Juju can just do everything. She's so smooth. And I drive a lot of my girls, and we load up the minivan to go to practice, and I hear them talking, and to hear them mention those girls' names and stuff, like it's kind of cool. I know as a boy when I was younger, and we were talking about Magic and Bird, and and then Jordan coming in the scene, like it's cool to hear them talk about girls, and as a girl dad to see that they don't have to talk about Jordan, like they're talking about girls as their heroes, and they're legit, man. They can play, and it's pretty cool to see how this game has been blowing up for them.
A really good point by both of you, and we see that trickling down to District 10 because, as we talked about, whether it's Northwestern, some of the other matchups in 4A that we're going to see, there are going to be a lot of teams that are going to be in the thick of things. I got one more for you, Coach, before we let you go for the night. I know, obviously, for you, it was a difficult decision to step down, but I think Erie probably got the guy that they were happy to be the successor, if you will, in Shannon Pulliam. We know the legend that he was at Strong Vincent in his time in Erie. Just your thoughts on maybe how he can take the team that you were able to build so well to a District 10 champion and push them to that same level, if you would, your thoughts on Coach Pulliam.
Well, yeah, I mean, a key to success, that's tough to pinpoint, but I'll tell you, through my career, my best teams were always my best defensive teams. Because you can't always make shots, and I think Shannon has always been defensive minded. It maybe different than other coaches. Sometimes I can remember when all 3 of us, Matt Jones at East and me at Central and him at Strong Vincent, different styles. Me, a lot of half court intense man to man. Shannon had the 1-3-1 trapping tornado, and you got Joe Jones with the 3-2 zone. Like a lot of different styles, but all 3 of them are really good defenses. And Shannon's always had his, that's his go-to, and I think that'll continue with success as they go through. A lot of talk after their loss with Harbor Creek. But it's early in the season, and that was their first game. A lot of people don't realize that their tournament at Sharon, they had to pull out because of the weather. They weren't going to school. And I teach in the district. We were off that whole week after Thanksgiving. So there was no practices going on, and all of a sudden you got to play a game and you're at home with a young team, right? That and you come out and you're not making shots, and you got an experienced Harbor Creek team, and then you're in a battle, and sometimes things happen. So Shannon's going to get that thing going. They're going to play good pressure team defense, and that's going to turn into offense. And I think that's a key that'll keep them being successful. And like I said, that's one of his staples.
I was telling Jonathan, I didn't tell him before the show, but he'll get a good laugh out of this. He's leaving back for South Carolina. I know, warm weather in February. We got to bring him back for the McDowell Erie D10 championship game. That atmosphere has become one of the, I think, in my view, top 5, maybe top 3 atmospheres in District 10. That always is so freaking exciting to watch that game. It
really is. It was so difficult when we first consolidated to get our guys focus off of the old East and Strong Vincent, the city rivalries. we just really pounded it into their head that, like McDowell, like that's our rival. And look at, they rung the bell at their gym after the prep game. Like, I really tried to point out those things, and it just built into, that nice rivalry where you hate each other. But, it was so cool last year to see my players hugging it out with their players, because they were such good friends. But on the court, man, they were some really good battles, packed gyms, and it was very exciting times.
Going to be exciting again this year. And the nice thing for you, Tom, maybe it will, but I don't know if your blood pressure is going to be through the roof if and when I'm sure you attend that game. Although I think as a support staff man as well, there's still some excitement in the air for you. Hey, Tom, first and foremost, we thank you for coming on the show. Your knowledge is second to none with a lot of coaches and former coaches around, and hope to see more of you. It's always great to talk to the experts, and hopefully it's a great rest of the winter season for you as you coach your team, hopefully to an undefeated year.
That'd be great. I appreciate you having me on. I hope to see you guys again.
Appreciate
All right,
you,
Tom Koval, great stuff from him, former Erie High head coach, District 10 champion coach, and just some guy, Jonathan, as you know, that knows so much about the game. Hey, by the way, a couple of games to look out for before we end our show tonight that are interesting to me tomorrow. Meadville facing General McLean, that one at GM. Big game there between 5A and 4A schools. Erie, Coach Koval's former squad, visits Fairview. You've got Mercyhurst Prep in Sagertown, then Iroquois, who's still looking for a big win this season. They're getting Sharon, who I believe is undefeated to start the season. And then on Saturday, how about this game on Saturday, Jonathan? Ready for this? Warren Northwestern. And then on Monday, Harbor Creek Cathedral Prep, both in girls basketball. Warren just lost to General McLean tonight, 52-32. Northwestern sitting there undefeated. I just think there are going to be so many games to start the season, Jonathan, and we'll get to talk about it week by week.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of good matchups early on, and it's going to be an opportunity to see some of these powerhouse teams and some of these teams that we think are going to be really good, and they get to clash early in the season when they're maybe not at their best. They're not quite clicking yet, haven't had a lot of practices yet. So it's just going to be really a lot of who wants it more, who's able to play a cleaner game early on. And it's going to be a lot of fun battles early in the season.
Well, a great show again tonight. As always, we want to thank Rebridge Investments for sponsoring our show. They can be reached every single day, keeping financial guidance simple at 814-734-3433 or on their website, rebridgeinvestments.com. Our thanks to everyone with the podcast. Coach Tom Koval for joining us. We hope to have him back in future weeks. His expertise, it makes it easy for us. We just get to sit here and look pretty well. Tom gives us the lay of the land. Also want to mention as well, tomorrow is our next show, Friday, 7 o'clock. You can not worry about braving the snow, stay indoors and talk to us. Jonathan and I will join Nick Artman and Wayne Bradford for NFL Week 15 predictions. And Nick is going to reveal his college football playoff bracket because he's headed to Disney next week. Lucky guy. Maybe I can catch a breeze flight on Saturday here out of the Erie International Airport. Hey, Jonathan, stay warm. Go out and shovel some more snow or put some salt in the driveway. I've heard it's going to be cold tomorrow.
Man, I'm not leaving my apartment for the rest of the night.
I don't play.
I've been out all day. I'm home. I'm warming up and kicking back and watching some TV, man, with the heat on.
Me too. Touche. I feel you. All right, that's it for us tonight. Join us back tomorrow at 7 o'clock. Adios, everybody. Enjoy your Friday and your weekend. Have a good one.